Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known on this Friday, January 28th, 2022. Street Certified National is a coalition of formerly incarcerated leaders from across the nation, across the Live Free national faith-based campaign. The nonprofit believes that the need for this space is informed by the understanding that those with justice impacted lives lived experiences need an exclusive space allocated towards their development, supporting the building of their network, and creating a culture of dignity. The goal is to support a pipeline of development and well-being for formerly incarcerated people across the country to pass policies that stops mass incarceration in America with dignity. Today, we speak with Live Free's Britt White and the Reverend Joby Jones. But first, the headlines this morning. President Biden yesterday reiterated a campaign promise. He said he's going to pick a Black woman for the Supreme Court. We have a clip of the president.
I will nominate will be someone with extraordinary qualifications, character, experience, and integrity. And that person will be the first Black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court.
At the White House yesterday, the president praised Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, who made his retirement official on Thursday, vowing that his choice to replace him would be a Black woman. It was a campaign promise, and he says he's made no decisions except one, that the person would be a Black woman. Now it'll be up to the Senate to confirm any nomination that the president will make. He said that he would make that nomination by the end of February. So we'll be waiting with bated breath to see who the president chooses as the next Supreme Court nominee. Also in the news this morning, Dr. Anthony Fauci says scientists are working to develop a universal coronavirus vaccine to protect against any coronavirus or variant. But such a breakthrough won't come for years. Dr. Fauci said, I don't want anyone to think that pan-coronavirus vaccines are literally around the corner in a month or two. Fauci, of course, is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And he said Thursday, I should say, during a White House briefing, that it's going to take years to develop an incremental fashion. Fauci, who is also the President Biden's chief medical advisor, said that for the coronavirus that causes COVID-19, there are currently 5 variants of concern: Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, and Omicron. He says, so obviously, innovative approaches are needed to induce broad and durable protection against coronaviruses that are known and some that are even at this point unknown. Fauci said the terminology pan-coronavirus vaccine isn't new, and he would explain later. Also, this morning in the news, Wyoming's first Black sheriff have fired a white deputy who is accused of tormenting a Black subordinate for years with racist name-calling that led him to quit, a new federal lawsuit has revealed. Albany County Patrol Sergeant Christian Hanley once drove past and yelled a profanity and the N-word at Corporal Jamin Johnson while Johnson and his wife and children were walking out of their home. Another example we should say of his racism alleged in the discrimination lawsuit filed just last week. Mr. Hanley said he later apologized for having not realized that Mr. Johnson's family was present, as if his vile racism was otherwise acceptable. The lawsuit continues that Johnson wants Hanley to not only pay for damages, but he's seeking a jury trial, if necessary, and damages for the years of racism that he says led up to his decision to quit in 2017. The allegations put a new spotlight on the sheriff's office in Laramie, the Albany County seat known for the murder of a gay University of Wyoming student, Matthew Shepard, in 1998. It was a crime that drew unprecedented attention to LGBTQ rights and hate crimes. The racism allegations come after Aaron Appleland's appointment as Wyoming's first Black sheriff in the wake of an outcry in the deputy's 2018 shooting of an unarmed man who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Wow. This continues to go on. This is one lawsuit we will continue to follow. Mass incarceration. Street Certified National is a coalition of formerly incarcerated leaders from across the Live Free national-based campaign. The nonprofit believes that the need for this space is informed by the understanding that those with justice-impacted lived experiences need an exclusive space allocated toward their development, supporting the building of their own network and creating a culture of dignity. The goal is to support a pipeline of development and well-being for those formerly incarcerated, those across the country. Here to talk about it this morning is Britt White and the Reverend Joby Jones. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. And we'll start with you, Britt. Ladies first. Tell us a little bit about your team and what you do.
Hey, everybody. I am the Decarceration Director for Live Free. And Live Free is an organization that focuses on reducing gun violence across this nation with dignity, as well as getting people and keeping people out of prison and jails. And my team, we are all formerly incarcerated or justice impacted people across this country. That means we ourselves have been within these jails and institutions and have fought for our freedom. This gives us lived experience that makes us experts on what are the solutions needed, not just with mass incarceration, but often the violence that intersects with the pipeline to incarceration. And I'm very excited to delve into this topic today.
Yeah, and Britt, before we go to Reverend Jones there, what's the website so folks can find out even more information about you?
I appreciate that. You can log on to livefreeusa.org, and you can also follow us using that same handle across social media platforms.
Great. And Reverend Jones, now everyone in this organization has been is formerly incarcerated, which makes it really unique. Why is that important?
Well, actually, as she said earlier, it's the lived experience, right? It's understanding that we were a part of the problem. Now that we have an opportunity to come back and set a different tone, show them something different, give them an example of what it's like to turn their life around, and that you could still come back and help fix some of the problems that they may have caused. And that's been the heart of a lot of the people that we deal with. Is now that we got ourselves together, now we understand the system, now we understand the mistakes people make. Now it's just going back and giving them the help that they need to overcome it and press through some of that stuff, and then us walking alongside them at the same time, because it's gonna take a team. We're all family, so we understand we've been there. So let you know that you're not out here by yourself in this stuff, and we have resources and we have a heart and an ear to work with you.
And so let's talk about some of those resources, Britt. Explain what resources are available, because we know that a lot of times returning citizens are treated like pretty much like they're still incarcerated. There's no opportunities for them. There's no jobs. They don't get a break for the most part. What are some of the resources?
I think those direct services are going to be particular to the region of the country people are coming home. And so we are not a direct service organization, but I think Live Free is more concerned about why people don't have these resources they need when they first touch down. So I came home September 6, 2014. My clothes were old, my car was gone, and I literally had nothing. And yes, I had some immediate needs that needed to be met and supported, but even more so, I was grateful to come into a path that began to examine whose imagination was it that policy would exist that would cause a reality that people would come home with nothing, that people aren't met with resources at the door by the government, and it's not allocated from our taxes. So Street Certified is more concerned about changing the laws of the land that continue to predicate a reality that people are not able to reestablish themselves with dignity.
Yeah, and joining us now from Insight News in Minneapolis is Al McFarlane, the publisher. and also the host of Conversations with Al McFarlane. How you doing, Al?
I'm great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So let me just run these stats by you. We can start with the Reverend Jones, and then Britt, you can speak to it, and Al, I'm sure you could speak to it as well, and perhaps you have some questions for our guests on this. But the percent of Black Americans in the general U.S. population is 13%. However, percent of people in prison or jail who are Black, 40%. Incarceration rate, Black versus white Americans, 2,306 per 100,000 Black residents are in prison, as opposed to 450 per 100,000 white residents. So we could stop there with the statistics. We have more later, but when you hear those numbers, how much up against it are we, Reverend Jones?
Man, I'm back against the wall, right? In reality, and this is from experience also. I mean, they will find a reason, right, to take you to jail. I mean, curfew, can't be around certain people, can't be in certain neighborhoods, a pullover, you fit the description, and all these things are truth, right? I've even in our community with our police, we've had these conversations on how we can adjust some of these numbers. It just, I think the way they see us, the way how they view us, or maybe even the way it's stuff like that, man. So it's easy for them to hurry up and lock us up and throw away the key, or put us in a situation to where we have to take a charge. I've been in situations where they'll leave you in the county jail so long that you just want to get out, so you'll take a charge, right? Because you're just tired of sitting up in there. So it's real. So we have to do something about that.
Yeah, and Brittany, Britt, I should say, we're joined also by the National Newspaper Publishers Association's President and CEO, Dr. Benjamin Chavez. Good morning, Dr. Chavez.
Good morning, and thank all of our panelists on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Karen Carter Richards, our chair. We represent 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies. I'm always glad to be on. Let it be known. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chavez. So, Britt, the mass incarceration of African Americans in particular, it's a lot to combat. But as we're talking about, when you're coming home, there's some important things to know, and you guys are providing some of that. You're building this national coalition. Tell us a little bit more about the dignity part, because that's part of what this is about, right?
Absolutely. I believe that the opposite of dignity is shame. And it's often the shame that many people have experienced as children that puts them on a pathway to be vulnerable to incarceration. And what we are establishing in Street Certified is that the experiences that have put people on a pathway to be incarcerated are not unique. And so it is often in isolation that shame builds up and overthrows people. And we're inviting people into a community and connection of people with similar lived experience, saying, hey, actually that experience does not give you more shame. It makes you an expert. And we're asking you to come into the fold and advocate for not only your dignity, but the dignity of people that will come behind you. The current realities of what Black people are facing under this administration is that people in this, Black people, especially within this pandemic, are more vulnerable to go into the system than ever, in the sense that our socioeconomical needs are not being met in Black communities. We still have not been provided relief in the form of forgiving student loan debt. We have not been supported and economically supported with reparations and things that could make an immediate effect on our day-to-day life, material lives and conditions. And I believe that's what people want. People don't want empty promises. People don't want to be handed a sheet of paper and say that these jobs are known to be felony friendly. Folks want actual relief that they can see in their day-to-day lives. But what I came to share with your audience today is that people are not going to just turn over the reins of power, that we actually have to come together as a group of people with similar lived experience, and we have to wield that power and we have to demand it. And so we see ourselves as a vehicle of power for those who are not traditionally politicized. Whether you know anything about politics, about if you know anything about how laws get changed, we're asking you, if you've been impacted by the justice system, to come check out Street Certified, because we are building up a voting base of people who are particularly concerned about those with our lived experience.
Yeah, and Al McFarlane, here's a couple more stats, Al. I'm going to throw out the percent of people serving life without parole, or virtual life sentences who are Black. 48%. The arrest rate for Black versus white Americans, 6,109 per 100,000 African Americans, as opposed to 2,795 per 100,000 for white Americans. And also the number of arrests of Black Americans in 2018, the latest available, 2.8 million. And finally, Al, the percent of people on probation or parole who are Black, 30%. Al, I'm going to kick that over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Ben and panelists. I'm grateful for you all, Britt and team, and Reverend, for what you're doing. You're on the right track. And I think it's a question of redefining what our interests are, of clarifying and framing the discussion about what the experience has been, and putting it in a context that lets us know that we are, at the end of the day, still a resilient, whole, health-oriented, healthy, becoming people and human beings, that we have a right and a responsibility to health and wholeness, to wellness, to prosperity. And the numbers reflect a couple of things. One, at the shallowest level, they reflect either dysfunction, disappointment, misdirection, and the experience of violating community standards and therefore being responded to. The numbers reflect also who's doing the arresting. And when you have 6,000 per 100,000 of Black people arrested versus 2,700 of white people arrested, it makes you wonder, what if you had a situation where in most urban areas in the state, the arresting authority was Black? Who's doing the arresting and why? And so I wrote a piece years ago that I delivered in the newspaper and also to the state legislature called Black Crime, Black Punishment. The premise was this: right now, our experience and participation in the criminal justice system is as the problem, but never as part of the solution. We have to see ourselves as part of the solution, or really as the solution. And so look at the incarceration justice system as a business. We are the product. We're being passed through it just like we were in the business of human bondage, slavery. Not a big difference. And so what happens if we say to ourselves that, yes, we deserve to be safe and secure in our families, in our homes, our neighborhoods, and yes, there should be civility and decency, and yes, there should be a cost to violating the family, the neighbor, the human trust. But who should manage that? And are there other ways of looking at keeping us safe and managing outliers that also reflect the will and the accountability, the sovereignty of our people in maintaining justice, peace, and handling correction? Can we look at that as a business? And so my point is, if you have to go to jail, the jail should be in my neighborhood. My neighbor, the contractor, should build the jail. My neighbor, the sociologist, should be the caseworker. My neighbor, the officer, should be the arresting authority, the policeman. My neighbor, the laundry company owner, should have that contracts, all the business associated with the incarceration the arrest, the release, the movement of people from a position of violating trust back to the community ought to be business that is our business. Two things would happen. One is that if we remove the incentive of money from white people for the business of detaining Black people, and we take control of that revenue stream, the revenue stream will shrink. The second part is if we start arresting white people the way they arrest us, game change. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it, Al. And I know Britt wants to respond.
Yeah. Stacey, that's especially why I was interested in coming on this show and this platform in particular, because all across major media right now, there is a narrative being perpetrated that violence is on the rise in major cities across this country. And when you hear this discussed, it is often from the expertise of former chiefs of police and district attorneys, and people such as myself with lived experience have not had the opportunity to weigh in on this current narrative. And what I think is important to remind your audience is that often people who are perpetrators of gun violence in particular have themselves been victims of state-sanctioned violence. Well, what is state-sanctioned violence for those who don't know? It is violent to put people in a community and not offer them access to healthy food. It's called food apartheid. It's violent to put people in an education system and their school is full of mold and they don't have the necessary information to be successful. That's violent. It's violent to grow up in a community where you see the police more than you see any other public official or member of the community. We have socialized our people into being treated inhumane, and then we expect them to be able to go on and succeed in society. Also, within these state legislators across the country, there have been a number of open carry laws that have passed, particularly here in the South. In Texas, where I live, in Tennessee, where I live, you no longer need a gun permit to be able to carry your weapon in this country. So you don't have to be competent. You don't know how to clean and store that gun. You only have to be able to access it to be able to carry it. That is a recipe for disaster. And we are literally seeing the South turn into the wild, wild West. But these things are not being offered to the conversation when we talk about the uptick in violence. We also have to go back to how Black people in particular, our socioeconomical needs are not being met. So if I can't feed my family, if I can't find a job that will pay me a livable wage, then what is the incentive for me to function humanely in society? So rather than address the root issue that Black people's needs are not being met, they rather police and criminalize the symptom and say that there's an uptick in violence and we need more police. Actually, we need more resources to restore our humanity.
Dr. Chavis, I know you want to weigh in.
Yes, this is a great discussion. I want to thank each of our panelists. And I think the statistics that you laid out, Stacey, are very, very important. I would just say this from the perspective of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Black Press of America. Mass incarceration is a reality. We must move, Black America and other communities of color, we must move from mass incarceration to mass liberation. From mass incarceration to mass liberation. And I think what our colleagues and our panelists are suggesting this morning, the fundamental right to self-determination is at stake here. You know, we have to begin to do for ourselves. When the government fails us, or when the state fails us, or when the city fails us, or the county fails us, we have to do something for ourselves. I agree with our sister that we've been socialized to wait on entities outside of our community, outside of our family, to take care of us. We have to take care of ourselves. That's what I mean by moving from mass incarceration to mass liberation. On the voting piece, they're trying to, this is a very important year, 2022. Some states now allow persons who have been incarcerated to vote. Others don't. And a lot of the states that don't want you to vote. And that's part of the criminalization that our sister mentioned, where they take away your right to vote, they take away your right to work, they take away your right to breathe. And what are we supposed to do? But there's one right that they cannot take away from you, and that's our human rights. Because human rights are God-given rights. They're not constitutional rights. They're not something that was in the Declaration of Independence. You're born with the fundamental right to be free. You're born with the fundamental right to breathe fresh air. You're born with the fundamental human right to be able to drink fresh water and to be able to be productive. And we need to champion. I support all of what has been said this morning, but I was just thinking in terms from the Black press perspective, Stacey, we need to do more issues like this. Mass incarceration, the criminalization, the alienation of our people, the mischaracterization, all these things. It's systematic. It's not one thing. You know, you have to see mass incarceration has linked to gentrification. You have to see how it's linked to healthcare disparities. All these things are connected. But I don't want people to get overwhelmed thinking that the case is hopeless. It is not hopeless. We can turn this situation around. But we got to have the determination, we got to have the fortitude and the courage to stand up and face these challenges where we ourselves take ourselves from mass incarceration to mass liberation.
Well, to your point, Dr. Chavis, it's not hopeless because Live Free campaigns across the U.S. have created campaigns and local organizing owned by Black and Brown leadership. And some of the victories, Reverend Jones, let's talk about it. The ban the box, school to prison pipeline in Minnesota, police accountability and urban gun violence, California. There was a $5 million increase in funding for implementation of best practices. Reverend Jones, talk about some of the victories that you guys have had.
Well, those are some awesome things. Just even our city of Fresno, they have taken upon an advanced peace organization with they paid the city of Fresno paid organization to go after some of the top shooters, active shooters in the city to help them get back on track. I myself have the Fresno Street Saints. We do a lot of intervention, prevention, work in the school. We work in 5 schools, after school programming, things of that nature, helping guys coming out of the streets get back on their feet by introducing them to at-risk youth and allowing them to tell their stories so that they can also build that bridge, right? I think, especially in the 90s, our generation, because we were ripping and running and stuff, there was a gap there. So what we had decided to do is that we recognized that we were part of the problem. So we met with city officials and told them, hey, these are some of the issues that we're having. Our guys want jobs. They want to get themselves together. So could you help us out? So we came up with a list and told them, hey, these are some of the barriers that our guys face. They may not have an ID. They may not have a social security card. They may not have training. Would you guys be willing to come alongside us and help us train them and put them in positions so that they can get a livable wage, so that they can feel like a man who's coming home. I got an opportunity to turn my life around. Now I'm here. I have something that's valuable to me. So they're not going to be so ready to risk that, because now they have something to strive for instead of going out there in the streets and taking a fast buck and getting it like that. So that's what we do. Right? Those are some of the victories. Job implementation, connections, community engagement, people who will come alongside you, financial literacy pieces and all that, because our people don't know, right? And if you don't know, you won't take that next step and make sure things end up in the right, in your life together. So those are some of the victories that we have. Those are some of the things that we do. We continue to have a great relationship with our city, with our officials, and with the community, right? We can't do nothing without the community. So we let them know, hey, we want your voice in on this. We have community meetings. We do marches, block parties. I mean, we have a space in the center where we come together. We meet regularly. And I think what I'm learning, especially with this community work, is that we can't all be separate. One organization doing this, one organization doing that. We all come together and make a bigger impact. And now our voice will be heard because now they recognize the power that we have standing collectively and not so much individually. I noticed that sometimes one group will start and the city will come in and pull them to the side and shut everything down. So now we don't want to go in there by ourselves. We want to go through there collectively and have one voice and hold them accountable for their actions. So those are some of our victories.
Yeah, and Britt White, one of the things I keep hearing from Reverend Jones is accountability. But coming home, the community does have some responsibility to help with this, right? I mean, it's not that every returning citizen doesn't want to be held accountable. In fact, that returning citizen has paid his or her debt to society, correct?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't assume that every incarcerated person was actually guilty. So some people are incarcerated without actually having a debt to pay to society. And so I don't know that it's helpful to group everybody into that category. But what I will say is coming home back to society was one of the hardest things that I ever did. I was incarcerated for 5 years in the state of Alabama, and I'm not even from Alabama. So I did my time in a place that I'm not even from. And so I was separated from my family. And in order to acclimate myself to do time, I had to assume a posture and a mind state that was not necessarily healthy and functioning within society. So through the love and support of my family, my church, and my support system, and my community that has been wielded through Live Free, I was able to shed off some of those toxic behaviors and some of those survival instincts in order to acclimate myself better back into society. But people had to do some very radical things to help me. I had probation fees every month. There was a point that I was $700 behind in my probation fees, and my employer at the time gave me the cash out of his pocket in order to keep me free. And that is the type of support people have to have access to. When you come home, you don't have a job most of the time, and you have immediate needs. You have to start paying probation, parole, and monitoring fees as soon as your feet hit the ground. And so those fees stack up very quickly across a period of time if you don't have the ability to pay for them. So what we are trying to wield is while we wait for laws to get changed, for people to come home, for the system to be more supportive of the dignity of Black people in particular, we have to walk closely with people and begin to understand that the more you love on and support people and meet their needs, that you are literally lowering their propensity to go back into the criminal legal system. And it's a very difficult process. It was not always easy for my family to understand why I could be cold, I could be callous. I was not always comfortable going out and being in large crowds. So we have to take some of the shame and take that veil off. We often deal with these issues in the privacy of our homes. So we think that whatever issues come up are unique, but many people are experiencing this across the country. We just don't talk about it, right, Joby?
Right. And then even with that, we know when you're coming home, those first couple of days are crucial. Where are you going home to? Are you going back home to the hood? Because if you're going back to the hood, them homies gonna be waiting on you. So that means your chances of going back to prison are going to skyrocket. What was your relationship with your family when you left? Your baby mama, why did you get sent to? Is an issue with her, right? So all those things come into play. So we have to have something in place for when they come home, have a plan in place for them, and have somebody alongside them that's going to walk with them that whole step of the way, because it's very crucial. I mean, our recidivism rate is high. It's easy to go back, even when they've been out, they've been trying to get a job, or they've been trying to get it together, and they just don't because they don't have those qualifications, or they don't know somebody who knows somebody. That's how I got my job. I knew somebody. So if you don't have the right connection sometimes, right, and you'll get frustrated and be like, you know what, forget this. I'll just go back. And I've heard that conversation a lot of times, because in there they become institutionalized. And when you're institutionalized, it's easier for them, for you to go back and live a structured life, right? You got a meal, you got a bed, you got all these things, but at the same time, you're not growing, you're not developing, you're depending on the state. So we're trying to break you out of that, right? Live free. We're trying to get your mindset to understanding that you are more valuable to your family, to your community outside, right, than you are inside. So it's just changing that whole mindset, changing that whole structure, tearing it down and rebuilding it up, because at the end of the day, there are people who spent 20, 30 years up in there, and they come home and they still got a 15-year-old mentality, right? They still got a 12-year-old mentality. They went in and came out the same way. So no, come on, why is that? Why? What is it? What happened while you were in there, right? They lost family, they lost brother, they lost all these things. So there was no motivation on the inside of them for them to grow. So when we come out, we have to send them to soft skills, right? Job training, development, education school. There's a Fresno City College out here that has when you get out, they have a program that help you go to college, right? They'll pay for your books and all that stuff. So we have to make them aware of these things so that they know that, hey, there's help. I can't turn around. I don't have to stay like this. So it's a blessing to be in that work, in that space, and let them know that, hey, we're here to support you. We're going to connect you. We're going to walk alongside you. We're going to encourage you. Hey, we're going to pray for you. You go to church, right? We're going to do this community stuff. We're going to get you back involved and tell your story to the next generation so that they don't make that mistake.
Yeah, Al McFarlane, they call it, I'm sorry, Britt, Al, they call it the Department of Corrections. And I think Chuck D famously said, when did the state pen ever correct anything? The corrections is the wrong word, because as Reverend Jones just brought out, you go in, some people have gone in, they've been in there a long time, they come out, they're still 15 years old as far as their mentality is concerned. I want your thoughts, Al.
Well, I think we have to, these are great points that are being made. We have to educate ourselves about the notion of our responsibility to each other and our responsibility to take charge of safety and of justice in our communities. I think that we should look at and begin to talk about incarceration as a training school. It should be corrections, in that people have a chance to and are encouraged to and are incentivized to learn how to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, and productive while they are incarcerated. There ought to be investments to provide the incarceration experience as a place where people can get better. What it can do is that, when people come out of jail, they do find a hostile environment, an environment of skepticism and doubt, where they have limited choices, harder to find a job, harder to be around people that are afraid of you. And so what ought to happen is that we need to figure out how to sort of support, invest in systems like what Sister Britt and Reverend are doing to grow these resources to help people transition from incarceration back into the community. Put the money in to resources like this so that there is a institutional process, a protocol for moving everybody from incarceration into community in a way that develops the entrepreneurship and the employability of those people making transition. I think entrepreneurship is really the path. I think that people who are in prison, in jail, ought to be encouraged to look at how they can monetize their lives differently, not through crime, not through being in situations where they are accused or falsely accused or properly accused, but to look at the situation and determine what resources and strategies, processes, tools they need and can develop, particularly in the digital age. Education and the delivery of knowledge is different from ever before. And there's no reason that people who are in jail now can't learn to be entrepreneurs when they come out of jail or while they're in jail, and become effective entrepreneurs when they come out. And as opposed to having to come out and feeling some kind of way, shame-driven, shame-based, begin to build businesses that are legal, that are transparent, and that serve the community, serve the market. That's what I think. I think that Minnesota has gone through, like many cities, a huge spike in crime, gun violence in particular. And what our state has done and is doing at the insistence of community organizers is saying, put the resources in the Black community. Let us enable us to use our money, our tax dollars, to provide alternative resources and routes for the young boys and young girls in our community that are involved in this spike of carjackings, gun violence, so-called youth violence that's going on. We can stop that, but we have to be resourced and enabled and empowered. Right now, the resource that you use is called Derek Chauvin. It's called Miss Potter. Chauvin, killed George Floyd. That's a resource. That's a strategy. The philosophy. Choke them. The philosophy is Potter, the officer in Brooklyn Center, I think it was, who mistaked her gun for a taser and killed the young man, Dante Wright. That is the policy of the country. The systems support and allow people to do those things to our people and get away with it. That's changing. We're at a point of inflection now, a point of reckoning because of George Floyd and because of Dante Wright and others like it around the country, where we are demanding a reassessment of this entire process that they call the criminal justice system. And at the end of the day, it means that we have to insert ourselves in the entire process from top to bottom, and we have to bring the true meaning of redemption, of public safety, creating alternatives that lift us up, not demonize us, and not get us killed, get us mass incarcerated.
Yeah, and there's so many questions from our audience, and we love it. But I want to go back to you, Britt, with this question from the National Newspaper Publicists Association's Executive Administrator, Claudette Perry. And it came across my mind, too, when you said it. She says she's never heard of probation fees. Is that standard in all probationary systems in the U.S.?
Yes. And if you take your probation out of state, so I was incarcerated in Alabama. I moved back to Texas where my parents live. There's an additional out of state fee. So my probation fees, I think, were like $65, $76 a month.
Okay, wow. And so you're still actually paying for being incarcerated, basically.
It is
paying for your freedom.
It is expensive to be incarcerated, and it's expensive to be poor. So as with anything else, once you get behind, there's a late fee.
And I want to also lift up a couple of things. Rosalind Osgood had made several points here, and I certainly one of the things she said is Black women are being incarcerated at larger numbers than ever before. When you think about that, the assault on the Black family continues, Dr. Chavis.
Absolutely, and I think that we need a unified call to action where our brothers and sisters who are returning, our brothers and sisters who are still in, our brothers and sisters who we need to prevent from going in the first place. I think that we need a comprehensive, systematic approach where all of us, those who are in the listening audience, those who are on the program, wherever we work, we have to make ourselves conscious of what we all should be doing to turn this situation around. When I was incarcerated during most of the 1970s as a member of the Wilmington 10 in North Carolina, I met some very bright, gifted, and talented brothers who were robbed of an opportunity to develop and to make a positive contribution in their own lives and to society. Mass incarceration is not the solution. It is part of the problem. And I think that today's program is indicating some of the opportunities, some of the responsibilities that we have as Black Americans, as people of color, to change this situation.
Yeah, and Britt and Reverend Jones, I want to go back to another a question from our audience. Denise Rolock Barnes, the publisher of the Washington Informer, she writes in, she says, to ask about the prison living fees. You mentioned the probation fees, and you mentioned potentially there's other fees too. What are the other fees associated with being incarcerated?
Oh, I mean, phone calls, the boxes, the packages that you're gonna need, all that stuff is daily. The trip, just going up there to see, depending on where you live at. I mean, that's a cost on the family. I think the most cost that you'll have is on the cost that it does to your family, right? Your kids, your grandma, your wife, right? Sometimes families are messed up forever. Even my experiences when I was in there, my wife used to bring my child to see me, and I told her, quit bringing him up here. And they was like, why are you saying that? I'm like, because I don't want him to see me like this. I don't want him to think that this is normal. You see what I mean? So if he keep bringing a 2-3-year-old child up here, 4-year-old child up here to see me every day, he gonna begin to think this is where he's supposed to be at.
So the cost goes beyond financial.
Yeah, it's a mental cost too. It's a traditional, it's a passed down cost. Our kids begin to think that's a rite of passage. No, this ain't a rite of passage. This is something I don't want to experience. So, don't. I'll suffer the loss. I'll suffer the heartbreak, and I'll explain that later on, right? And that right there tears a family up because I don't get to see him. My son is raised without a father, right? So how many things go on like that? So money is one thing, but the time, because you can't get that time back, and the deep scars that it leaves on your family is another cost that we don't really take into consideration.
Yeah, and Britt, he mentioned the cost of phone calls. I know the Washington Informer, speaking of the Washington Informer, and also Black Press USA has done stories on the cost of telephone calls from and to prisons. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. Like, I was incarcerated in Alabama, and my phone calls were like $20, $25 per phone call. So with that type of expense, I could only call home a few times of the week, because on top of those phone calls, my family was putting money on my books every month to support my needs for hygiene. So the state of Alabama does not provide hygiene that actually can be used on a woman's body. They provide 1 bar of lye soap we used to use to hand wash our clothes. Also, in addition to that, those legal fees that if you have a private lawyer, I had 2 private lawyers when I went to trial and loss. So you have your lawyer fees. A lot of people have restitution costs that are put on them. They have high phone calls. You have hygiene. The food that is provided within a lot of these jails and institutions are not fit for a wild animal, much less a human. So most people who are incarcerated are in a state of food insecurity and hunger for most of their incarceration. So you're also buying snacks and foods just to try to find some nutrition to get you through that period. So,
and it also costs, Britt, and Reverend Jones, doesn't it also cost, say you want to put money on your family member or a friend or a loved one, you want to put money on someone's book, say you want to put $20 on, doesn't that cost you maybe a $3 or $5 fee just to do that?
Yeah, there's an administration fee associated with everything.
And then restitution, I believe in California at the time it was 55%. So whatever you made, they took 55% out. And then the pay wage in there, my max is 32 cents an hour. So, and you only work for an hour. So it's not like you making a whole lot of money. So you working for pennies on a dollar, right? So it's slavery at its finest. That's what it is.
What Reverend is talking about is those who are in work release programs and are able to maybe go in society or have a job. In the state of Alabama, they took 60 to 65% of whatever you made. Mm-hmm. So it's impossible to beat that monster and get ahead. It's impossible to almost send money out to your family and beat any type of support because you're always 10 steps behind.
Yeah, Celeste Hart says prisons take money from your books. Jennifer Farmer talks about her son. She says, when my son was incarcerated, he was charged $2 per day. So anything I put on his books first went to his incarceration fee. She says, I had to pay enough to cover the fee and ensure he had money to buy what he needed. And Claudette Perry, again, she says, it's slavery by another name. Al, you want to chime in?
Yeah, Dr. Ben is right, exactly right. We as a community, and I think our role as the Black press is to create a national, a global discussion that examines the entire process and premise of the so-called criminal justice system in this country as part of an examination of the historic relationship between white supremacist thought and Black and brown bodies. The marginalization and the threat to the Black and brown body continues today. It's been a threat. How Europeans have decided to what's the right word, through imperial and colonial, and now simply white supremacist ideology devalue our humanity and process us. We have to resist that. And so we have a particular duty right now, Dr. Chavis, I think, to begin and to promote a different conversation, a different robust analysis of the historical relationship between white power and Black bodies, Black communities. And we have to point out that there is a monetization scheme that is, as Claudia said, as Ms. Perry said, is at the root of this relationship that means mass incarceration of Black people. We have to resist that and change it, number one, by taking control where we can of the public systems that are responsible for safety, for crime, for justice. We also have to insert into it a different understanding of what it means to be both preventive, curative, punitive, and to determine that we have the responsibility and the right to be the solution, that we are not the problem, we are the solution. And our solutions are going to be solutions that honor the legacy, the situation we've come through, and that honor the future that we are creating. All of it has to do with us determining that we are going to co-create a future in which our people win. And that is a future that backs off white supremacist thought and institutions, and creates institutions that honor us and our people. I think Britt is on the right track. Let's look at what happens with individuals on the one level, but at the same time, Dr. Ben, as you say, look at the institutional, the macro level. Change has to happen inside and out, up and down, and we are equal to the task, and now is the time.
Yeah, and before we're starting to run out of time, but I want, before I let Britt tell us a little bit about your call to action, I just want to point out that Live Free has a report card. They have a county policing report which displays each county's letter grade. They are tools for local communities to reduce the number of people of color lost to gun homicides and incarceration. And the highest grade I'm seeing so far of the prisons and jails that they have graded, the highest grade I see is a D. And that's pretty sad commentary right there. But Britt, there is a call to action. Can you kind of brief us on what the call to action is?
Yep. Before I give my call to action, I just want to give a special shout out to Black women who have been impacted by incarceration. Oftentimes, our experience is invisible in the narrative of mass incarceration, and Black women are often punished in society for going to prison because it's not necessarily feminine to go to prison, whereas with men, it often reinforces their masculinity. So I just want to tell my sisters that your experience and your voice matters in this movement. Now to our call to action. First and foremost, I would like to start at the top of the land with Joe Biden. I would like to reinforce what our good sister Nina Turner out of Ohio said. It is time to gas up the jet, go state to state, and begin to organize to get voting rights, get the Voting Rights Act passed. We absolutely, especially here in the South, are being attacked at all levels on our voting rights. And I do not see how we can comfortably enter midterms without voting rights being ensured and protected for Black Americans across this country. Formerly incarcerated people, if you yourself or a family member has been impacted by the criminal legal system, our voting rights live at the state level, meaning that the game they play is that the right to vote looks different state to state. It's many people who think once you get a felony conviction in this country, you automatically lose your right to vote forever. That is not true. It is different state by state. Please go look on your state's website and check the voting laws for your state. Black people, please do not sit these elections out. We're coming up on primaries. We're coming up on general elections. Get informed. Please go vote completely down the ballot. Last thing I'm going to do is ask people to follow Live Free on all of our social media handles. And if you are formerly incarcerated and you're interested in getting involved, please hit me up at Britt, BRITT, at livefreeusa.org. We would love to get connected to you.
Thank you so much, Britt White. Just want to, before I go to Dr. Chavis for his closing thoughts, just want to lift up two comments here. Bobby Henry, the publisher of the West Side Gazette, he says, in the West Side Gazette next week's edition, we will have a story written by an incarcerated brother on another incarcerated brother. We got to tell our own stories, no matter where the stories come from. And Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times says that we have a store in Baltimore that creates economic sustainability for those in prison and those who are recently released. They are able to make an income through self-employment. It would be great to see more of those systems. So, Dr. Chavis, certainly want to turn it over to you for your closing thoughts.
Well, first, I want to thank Britt White. I want to thank Reverend Jones. I want to thank Al McFarlane. And I thank all of those who have made contributions to this special edition of Let It Be Known. This is why we have the Black Press of America. It is our responsibility to reawaken our people and to keep them awake around these issues, mass incarceration, the criminalization, but also I want to talk about the humanization, and we have to challenge the dehumanization that is taking place. As the browning of America continues to increase, you would think that there will be a corresponding decrease in racial violence and racial inequity and the hatefulness that's in our society. But it's just disproportionate. Just the more that we come in place, the more our potential voter blocking becomes stronger, the more voter suppression that's out there. They're trying to take away our right to vote. So Britt is right. If we ever can do anything in 2022, we got to break all of these barriers, break all of these suppression tactics, and get out and put the right people in place. As Al McFarlane said, we need to have more of our own people running these systems. And as we change the systems, we can't wait till the system is totally changed. We have to work within what is going on right now for change, and then work to change those institutions, but also have a vision, global vision of what we envision the world to be, and shape and make that world come into reality. So I'm not pessimistic. I'm optimistic, and I'm sure that Britt and Reverend Jones would say that the three of us and many others who've been formerly incarcerated, we've decided not to put a period on our lives. That's not a period. That's a comma, and we have to learn from our experiences. We have to learn from our past, not repeat our past. So I think we have to work together. I think this is a great subject matter, Stacey, that the Black press needs to continue to work on every week and not just once a year during Black History Month.
Oh, absolutely, Dr. Chavis. And we hope you all understand now even more why we call this show Let It Be Known, the National Newspaper Publicists Association's flagship live stream. It's for you. It's for our people. It's to inform and educate and bring information that mainstream media refuses to bring to you. And if they do bring it to you, they don't bring it to you with the flavor that you wanted. And so as Britt mentioned at the top, it's a conversation that she couldn't foresee holding with mainstream media. So keep staying with us as we continue to let it be known. Everyone stay safe and have a great, great weekend.